So, because we weren't all part of that conversation, as I look across the back of this brand new, beautiful planter, I see some pink parts. That's not a proud moment. That is a paint defect that we are working on getting healed up. Many of your planters that are already in the shed have that same defect. This showed up more frequently to planters that are sitting at the dealership because they don't always have a beautiful roof over them like you do in your sheds. So the planters that are sitting on the dealer lots are actually show this discoloration sooner and more drastically. So it's not a proud moment. It is not something that is going to jeopardize your spring. So don't anticipate seeing an update with red components before spring. We are starting to work through that process. But take your planter to the field. We're way too close to spring to work at swapping those out at this point.
Okay, we can talk a little bit about the row unit. Like I said, a couple of you guys, I do quite a few planter inspections, so I'm going to kind of go through it in the same order that I do my inspections. I always start at the back of the row. So this press wheel here, Case has had them forever, right? It's just a big rubber wheel, doesn't do much. There's actually a ton of agronomics that go into it. It's actually a zero pressure wheel. So there's no air pressure in it. It's fairly soft. After a couple seasons, it'll get softer. It's designed that way to leave a crown over the row. We don't want to be like competition and leave a divot at the row. So that goes along with the chevron pattern and the center rib. That chevron pattern there is designed to run water away from our seed trench. You plant tomorrow, we got pretty good rain coming tomorrow night. You know, we get 3/4 of an inch of rain on it. I want that water away from my seed. I want the ground moist. I don't want it laying in a puddle. So with that crown, and then we put the chevrons in it, it actually directs water off to both sides of our seed, so we're not leaving it in a puddle. What happens after we get, you know, 1.5 inches of rain on freshly worked worm dirt, and it was working beautifully, and 24 hours later we get 1 inch of rain. Rotary hose start coming out, right? Start busting that crust up. This center rib is designed to leave that rotary hoe in a tree line where it's supposed to be. As that crusts over, we put that center that rib down there, it gives it a place to crack. We want it to crack over our row. So everything about this is designed with water in mind. It's the last thing it runs over the row. We're dealing with the top of the ground. There are 2 positions here. The early planters didn't have that. That second position is mainly for rocks. We've got pretty minimal clearance between here. So if we do run into those, you know, perfect softball sized rocks and you're dragging them, you're creating a furrow right down the center of the road, taking everything out that this thing's supposed to do, we can move this back. We also have 2 different options for the amount of downforce that we've got, depending on the kind of ground you all farm with. I'm from central Indiana, west central Indiana. We've got different ground there. I run all the way down to almost Kentucky. We've got different ground down there. So we can put more force down or less force down depending on the kind of ground, depending on if you're no-till, conventional till, minimal till, whatever your operation is, we've got options here. We've actually got another option that's not on the planter. We can put a black spring here. So as you move that wheel back, it takes more leverage to push it down with the same amount of force. The black spring is more force. It's actually the same spring from the 1200s, right? So not a new part, but it is something that if we move it back and we've got a heavier soil, we want to tamp it down just a little bit more, we can swap those springs out and get more pressure there. Moving forward to our closing discs. How many guys we got coming from Kinsey or Deere or anybody else? Got a couple? So this is all foreign to you, right? Okay. If you're a precision guy, it wouldn't be foreign.
I've seen that. We don't.
Yeah, right. Yep. So we've run this 2-stage closing system for a long time. This is one part of what makes it an early riser planter. Our closing discs are designed the way that they are to close from the bottom up. I'm going to pick on you since I know you come from a different brand now. Closing wheels on your other planter, on your old planter. How many different kinds were there available?
A lot.
A lot. And they were all designed to reduce sidewall compaction, right? That's one of their everybody's sales tactic is it breaks up sidewall compaction. Well, with us closing from the bottom up, we don't need as much force. So our opener makes a true V, right? Everybody's heard that true V trench. We're not actually a true V, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we're narrow at the bottom, wide at the top. Our opener, or our closing disc, wide at the bottom, narrow at the top. We apply force where we need it. So since we're wide at the bottom, we only got to close that trench this far. So why put a bunch of extra force in it? Well, since we're shaped the way that we are, we actually zip that ground together and fold it back up from the bottom up, so we're not putting dry dirt back in our trench. We're putting the correct amount of force on our seed where we need to put force, so that we don't create those micro environments that delays emergence. We do have, I'm sure everybody around here's got, perfect, smooth, no rocks, square, beautiful fields, right? So I don't get up here a whole lot, so I see a head shaking.
We've got a realist in the group.
Yeah. So, Case heard you. They came out with this arm, and it's designed for rocks. I've had these planters out for about 9 years now. Rocks tend to get stuck right here. Like I said, take that perfect softball sized round rock and just wedge it in there, and you've all but got to beat it out with a hammer. This fixes that. There's a couple of things there. Matt, I'll let you talk about that.
Absolutely. All right, so the folks that have struggled the most with rocks, come around this side here so we can compare and contrast. So this bracket is an evolution to address several different items in our closing system. If I envision that my row unit's going to encounter a rock enough that it's going to trip my downforce and get underneath my opener discs, as that rock gets expelled, its next item it's going to encounter is either the lead shank here or hit this curved arch between my down pressure cylinder and my disc. This updated arm doesn't have a curved arch that would help cup that rock. Instead, it is flat, so as this lands on that rock, it's not going to allow it to wedge between my chevron discs. Instead, it's going to trip my closing discs, start to trip my wheel, and expel it on its way out. The next element is I've got one mounting position for my inboard disc, but I've got two mounting positions for my outboard disc. Agronomically, I would like to use these two to gently close and zip that seed trench shut. But if I step back to this one, put more stagger between my discs, I have now created a pocket where I can expel that rock a lot more easily. So that is something we've come up with, and we have the ability to replace these in kits of 4 at a time. So every planter that we sell is in multiples of 4 rows. They're available as a factory kit, where we try to drive the price of this down as close to our cost as possible because we want to overcome a problem that you're having.
Is that an option on a new planter?
It is not a factory option yet. This is something that we are selling after the fact. It also incorporates the bearing mount, which, Matt, when did that come into play? You want to talk a little bit about history on that bolt up front?
Yeah, so we came out with a pip last year for 24 model year planters to update those arms. Prior to that, there'd been, I know of 3 different iterations of pins holding that in. So wherever my guy was that had it for 4 or 5 years now, you probably broke, yeah. You're big enough, I'm surprised you're hiding back there. Caleb, go stand next to him. I'm guessing you broke some of those pins before?
I don't know if I broke them, but a lot of slop.
A lot of slop. So what was happening, we used to just run a pin through it and had
a simple clevis pin.
Yep. Had, you know, a solid pin, a rolled pin, or a coiled pin that was captured on the outside. Well, that bushing in the arm, the old arms, would seize to the pin as it was rocking up back and forth. It would just keep beating on that pin. And it would, I had some of them that would beat on it enough that it would just shit it right out the back. And it would take out the arm, and you'd lose your disc, you'd lose this closing cylinder, it'd tear all your lines up, and it'd turn what should be a fairly simple fix, putting a pin back in, into a pretty big job of replacing 3 or 4 parts and replumbing a row, and it's just what everybody wants to do when it's nice and sunny out in April.
It's a bad day for planter productivity.
Yes. So, Case came out with, that's probably easier to show.
Yep.
On this arm, we actually put a bearing in with a special nut that captures in the same groove that that solid pin or the rolled pin or the coiled pin went through. So now, if the pin seizes the bearing, I don't care. I drive them out with an air hammer anyways. I don't care if there's a lynch or a clevis in it or not. I'm just driving them out. With this, I'll drive them out the same way. Take the nut loose, drive them out. This bearing is all sealed, so it's not another maintenance point. Agronomically, something that I didn't realize till I started doing the pips is how much force it took for that air cylinder just to move the arm. You've ran them for a long time. What's your closing pressure like?
What I run?
Yeah, roundabout.
That's a good guess. Right? You never know what's right.
Yep.
Anywhere from 15 to 30, I guess.
But your ground's about the same as mine, then, because I'm about the same place.
Yep. That's the right range.
Yeah. But what if it takes 20 PSI just to move the arm? And it sets on the ground, and then as you move forward, it settles in a little bit. But if it took 20 PSI just to overcome the friction in that bushing, now all of a sudden, if you're set at 22, we're carrying 2 PSI of actual closing pressure at that point. And then on the flip side, if that needs to come up to roll over, you know, a dirt mound, a levee or whatever, it takes that PSI, that amount of pressure to come up, so we've got too much closing pressure on those spots. I know Matt's seen issues with it too, where we get inconsistent seed depth. Inconsistent seed depth turns into inconsistent emergence. Inconsistent emergence is, every agronomist has ever told us, is bad. So if we're putting too much closing pressure down, like I said, we close from the bottom up. If I'm too tight there, that seed's coming up with the dirt. So by upgrading to this bearing, we alleviate all that. Like I said, I've got planters, I've got 7,000 acres on that bearing now, and they feel just the same as they did when they were new. So it's just another way that we can be more consistent, get more even emergence, more even seed depth as we're doing what we're trying to do, right?
So
I always wonder, with all the technology we've had and what we've learned for all these years, why did Case come out with that from the start?
So
Some of that stuff's
right.
common sense.
Right.
We've already seen bushings not work.
Yep. And I think, personally, that they were trying to keep it simple. And what do bearings do? They either run smooth or they fail, right? And so I think that they were looking for the most maintenance-free option available. How many grease zerks are on these planters? Not many. There's more on the markers than there is anywhere else. It was kind of the same idea as the parallel arm bushings.
But we know bushings,
They fail. Yeah,
That's like,
they seize. Yep, especially on something like this where, that's it. So I agree. It probably,
like on the sharp tooth opener wood,
yep,
the arms there, those are all bushing, and then after one season, like when
they're all loose. Yep.
those get very easy.
I'll get to that too. I've got a fix for that. He doesn't like it, but I do. Speaking of shark teeth, 26 model year, that smooth wheel, we've got an option to put a shark tooth closer from the factory there. We can put it on now. We get them from Martin, right?
Yep.
So we're a Martin dealer.
What advantage does that give you?
So
let's hit one point before we dive into that. Matt was walking up real close to it. The whole conversation here has been about closer pressure, but I want to drive the point home. I like to keep our closer pressure as light as possible because I've walked too many fields where those discs, our inverted closing discs, are being treated more like a tillage disc. As I walk and inspect the planter, I want to see paint on the outside of those discs. And I only want to see the paint worn off the inside of the discs, only about halfway up to the rivets. If the paint is all worn all the way off to the rivets and the bottom of the casting is worn, there's a really good chance that somebody has got 40, 50 PSI closing pressure back here. The way those two discs cup that trench, that seed trench, and try to zip it shut, if I am over closing that, I am actually starting to push a wave of soil forward in my row unit. I am jeopardizing seed depth, seed moisture, and seed placement. So keep it light. So your question, what is the right range? 15 to 30? You're probably right. 15 to 30. 15 on conventional till, 30 on no-till or double crop beans. The factory default is like 20. So small numbers. Small numbers help the meter and the start keep that seed placed where we want it. Just like we don't like any seed firmers, whereas the blue and green planters love seed firmers, right? Our planter doesn't thrive with that mentality. So we have acknowledged the fact that the aftermarket has come out with serrated disc or fingers, all kinds of different variants for that closing disc. We feel that the Martin serrated closer, so it's a spiral, gives us a little bit of tillage action on closing that seed trench for heavy clay soils. Maybe we're out there cheating a little too early into the a wet planting condition or double crop, where we're out trying to close a seed trench into sun-baked wheat stubble, right? That's where we're starting to see advantage, and we offer them from the factory. We source them through Martin.
so to your question, it's less than optimal conditions.
Do you get penalized if you, like say,
So
better to run these most of the time, or can you run a serrated all the time and be fine?
are you conventional till?
No till.
Okay.
Sometimes you have, maybe a vertical tillage you're planting into for,
It's a minimal till,
or
yep.
you're on some muck.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard rumors about muck. Yeah, I don't deal with that, so.
We can go for a drive.
Yeah, my truck's too heavy to go for a drive, bud.
Show you what my
Like if you decided to go that route and you get by, is there any disadvantages to running it just general acres?
I like picking on one of my growers, Rose Brothers. 10,000 acres, covers a lot of different ground. He's all conventional till. I won't sell him those. For someone like you, that's mostly no-till, some minimal till, muck, I would probably look at that serrated or shark tooth. It's more aggressive. So if I push on you with my hand, it's spreading that pressure out over a bigger area. But if I poke you with my finger, Same amount of force went into it, but you feel a lot more pressure, right? It's the same idea with those Martins. Big smooth surface, does a great job on conventional till, if we're, loamy ground, fairly loose. If we start getting into some of those more challenging conditions, we can apply more pressure without applying more pressure, if that makes sense.
We start getting a little tillage action, a little shatter action.
Yeah, we get a little bit of shatter out of it. So that muck ground where we're worried about maybe some smear, adding, glazing that over, that shark tooth design actually breaks that up a little bit so that we reduce that compaction or that glazing as well.
So really more that hard clay soils where you see that benefit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the ground's hard, I'd run a shark tooth. If the ground's wet, I'd run a shark tooth. If you can float in between there, I wouldn't run a shark tooth. I don't think that there would really be any deficit of running a shark tooth on every planter. We got a lot of years of running these. I know what they do. I know how to
Never had a problem with
Right.
you know.
And that's what some of the things that I'm going to talk about that C&H doesn't offer are going to be fixes for things that we haven't really had a problem with, but they're better. So I'm the AFS specialist for Crawfordsville. He's the AFS specialist, and others, Aaliyah, Caleb, Isaac. I don't look at AFS the same way as some of these guys do. I look at it as what can I do to better this machine. If it's technology, great. If it's different bushings, great. If it's putting a bearing, I'm the AFS guy and I changed every one of these on all of our planters at Crawfordsville because it makes the planter better. But I want to make it better. So just so everybody kind of understands where I'm coming from, because I'm going to talk aftermarket on some of this stuff too. There are other options besides the smooth and the Martin shark tooth. Yetter makes a shark tooth. Yetter's been around for a long time. Yetter also makes a flat disc. But I do have a set of those Yetters flat out. Guys all no-till. It's a serrated or a shark tooth flat disc. So there's no concavity to it at all. He was willing to try it. I sold him to him cheap. We're going to give it a shot. I don't know if it's going to be any better than what we've got or if it's going to be worse. I still got his old disc, so I'll spend an afternoon putting it back on if I have to. But there is a lot of aftermarket options. Not every option is right for you or whoever. So it's kind of lean on your guys' rep. And like I said, I've worked on this for a long time. I've seen a lot with them, but I've seen a lot out of Montgomery and Putnam County. I mean, what county are we in?
Flagstaff.
Okay. So I don't get up here very often, so I don't know what you guys have got, but he does.
So, no matter what shape of wheel,
Yeah.
what's your opinion? Do we replace them in pairs or do we start staggering?
Oh, I replace them in pairs every time.
That is something that, on behalf of our brand's research, I look at what the aftermarket recommends for the Kinseys and Deeres, and you see one wheel of this format, one of that, and all that other malarkey. Maybe mix or match a row, but stay smooth on smooth or serrated on serrated. Don't start stair-stepping. Because what we remember, one of the reasons we love that bearing in there is it keeps that arm true to the center line of our trench. And we bring that soil together evenly from both the right side and the left. If we start changing the tillage tool that's on there, we're not going to close that trench evenly.
So everything I do on this planter is replaced as a pair, and I flip which side's leading halfway across the planter. I mean, closing discs, opener discs, row cleaners, whatever. If it's offset to the left, or the left side is forward on the left side of the planter, the right side is forward on the right side of the planter. Me being the AFS guy, I've seen where people have replaced their own and they put all their row cleaners on the same way. The right leads all the way across. That planter's going to draft the opposite way every time. And it's not going to be consistent across the field. And then one of the people I called out is going to come out and you're going to ask them, why are my bulk rows off? Why at this end of the field am I 32 inches and at that end of the field I'm at 34 inches? Well, at this end of the field is sand and that at the end of the field is clay. So it's going to draft different. So in my mind, I try to do that with everything through the whole planter, is just to try to keep it even. So that, like Matt was talking about, from a row standpoint, I want even pressure on both sides of my seed. From a whole planter standpoint, I want even distance between my rows. So trying to keep it the same on both sides of the planter and reverse it halfway through the planter, just trying to keep everything as similar as we can for every aspect of planting.
Balance the opposing forces.
Yep.
So on this planter, the closing discs are a lot bigger than what I have.
On 1200? Yep. So these are 9 inches new. Yours are 8 new?
8.
I was gonna say, they just look bigger.
Yeah. So these are 9 inches new, worn out at 8.5. Like I said, I'm pretty sure yours are 8, worn out at 7.5. Yeah.
Yep. And a lot of that, we'd never recommend mixing or matching because it has to do with the geometry of the hinge point. Our goal was to raise this up for better trash flow, raise the center line of that axle up to work within the geometry of this row unit. It's not like swapping 22-inch disc blades to 24s on a disc harrow, right? You think at that point you're gaining more tillage life or rowing radius circumference. Stay true to what your row unit was designed for. Good question, good observation.
My challenging part is clay up at Michigan City, and no-till, and there's some chickweed and little rocks. And then you got the auger car from last year, and that row unit goes boom, 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 boom. And this is my first year with Downforce, hydraulic Downforce. I'm assuming I'm just gonna have to turn up the pressure up there on that clay. Because 90% of what I farm is river, nice dirt. But that 150 acres up there, I'm telling you, you wouldn't take a Kinsey or a John Deere planter up there, it wouldn't do it. Because my case planters with
The offset openers, yep. Do you run row cleaners?
No.
No? I would look into some row cleaners. And I sell quite a few personally from what I've seen dealing with, we were a Kinsey dealer, right? I used to work for a John Deere dealer. What I've seen personally working on these planters, riding into tractors, digging profiles of the trench, I wouldn't run without row cleaners. And I wouldn't run them without clean sweep because I'm too lazy to get out and change pins when it's required.
Clean sweep, whether you're conventional till or no till, whatever, it gives you
Infinite,
options of conditions.
that you can change to in 10 seconds.
If you don't want them, just pick them up.
Yep.
You've got some clods,
Your chickweed.
chickweed will rip right through chickweed.
Yep.
Without the hydraulic difference on that chickweed just plugged up the row cleaners. I took them off one day, so mad.
Yeah, and that's where the clean sweep comes in because it was probably a plug-in because it would roll up over it. I can put down pressure on that row cleaner.
I need the down pressure to get through that clay.
Yep. Well, I can put down pressure on the row cleaner outside of the down pressure on the row unit. So I had a guy, it was a Kinsey planter, but it was about the same. You could see about the top half of the tanks planting through cereal rye. You couldn't see the bar at all. Top of the markers. It was taller than the hood of the tractor, pulling it with like a 280 Magnum. And I could get row cleaners through that. But like I said, it took the clean sweep being able to push down on it and stay engaged with the dirt to move it and not allow it to wrap back around.
And then what style of wheel on your...
It depends if you're no-till or conventional till. Really there's two styles, right? There's a tine and then there's a shark tooth. If you're conventional till, I like the tine. Let's get into the dirt, move the material, leave the dirt. If you're no-till, I like shark tooth. We're not worried about moving dirt as much, but I want that wide footprint on there so I can move all the residue out of the way. So there's definitely different options, different needs on every farm. Most of my guys run shark tooth, and I can get it done in conventional till with shark tooth, as long as you've got clean sweep. But if I was going to build a planter for conventional till, I wouldn't put shark tooth on. If I was going to guarantee every acre, every year was going to be conventional till, I'd put a tine on it. If there's a chance of needing some no-till, the tines suck on no-till. There's not enough footprint there to move the residue. So if there's a chance you're going to no-till anything, put a shark tooth on it.
Now, in your example, what row cleaners were they running? Were they tine wheels with a depth band, or were they the shark tooth?
I don't remember.
Just had a finger.
Yeah.
That's less than ideal for no-till.
It was a 1200 planter, and the row units weren't really strong enough to really handle them. That's the reason I went to this newer planter.
Yeah, these are stronger. Everything about this planter is heavier than that 1200.
Yeah.
And down to the hardware. Okay. So I'm gonna move forward just a little bit more. We've already hit on the openers. We run a leading edge opener. Be a little different for my deer guys, or deer, Kinsey? Deer. So you ran, what, took 3 business cards to set your openers? 2? I want business cards to fall out of my row units. Just greater than 0 to 1/8 of an inch gap is the spec. So I cheat. I reach in there and I feel them. If I can spring them back and forth and I can hit them with 2 fingers, they're pretty close. If I'm setting a brand new planter, I'll get, a 1/16 of an inch Allen wrench out, and I'll slide it between there. If I can get it between there, I know I'm greater than 0, and I know I'm less than an eighth. It's 4 and 5 shims behind the opener, and I can never remember which way. If it's 4 behind the leading, or 4 behind the trailing.
It's 4 behind the
leading
and 5 behind the trailing.
That's what I was thinking.
Because 5 trails
4.
Yes, that's an easy way to remember it.
The way I've always set them is I'll set my gap, and then I'll look from the back and look at my seed shoe and see how close to even the gap is on both sides. Because I want it centered on the row, right? So we don't want, 3 and 6. Your gap will be right, but your openers are shifted. So the gap is one part of replacing openers. Making sure they're centered on a row is the other part. If they're off-centered, you're going to smoke off this seed shoe. Seed shoes are different on these planters. You can't do that on a 1200. It doesn't move. The point's different on these planters. The point on a 1200 series planter actually came down to a point, right? I've been calling it a point because I'm still of 1200 nature, and I will call it a firming point. Case calls it a forming point now. I just call it a point. So with that flat bottom, like I said earlier, everybody talks about true V openers, right? We want a true V trench. Not with this planter. And the reason why, if I take a piece of paper and I fold it into a V and drop a seed in it, what are the odds of that seed settling with the point down? Who knows?
Pretty random.
Yeah, it's completely random, right? So if it settles with the point up, forward, or back, that leaves an air gap below that seed. That air gap is almost impossible to close, because we've got to push so hard to close that little tiny air gap that we're going to move the seed either forwards or up, more than likely. It's not impossible, it's just harder. We put a flat bottom in our trench. So it's about 1/8 of an inch wide, and it's completely flat. So that seed lands in there. I don't care if it lands point down, point up, it's going to fall over. It's going to end up point forward or back. It's going to be completely flat. Then our closers can come in and close on top of that seed. That seed shoe is the reason why we're able to run reduced inner diameter gauge wheels. It actually holds the seed trench open long enough for our closing system to close from the bottom up without dry dirt falling from the top back in around our seed. We don't want dry dirt in around our seed, right? It's the whole point of planting into moisture. Everybody plants 2 knuckles deep. I've heard that I've been doing this for going on 13 years. How deep do you want to plant, Mr. Customer? 2 knuckles. I don't know what 2 knuckles is. It comes out to about 2 inches. Looking at the wear points, you had a 1200, right? Did you have a little plastic card for your seed or your firming point?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't use that on this one. They don't offer a card anymore to tell when it's worn out.
How do you tell when it's worn out?
You replace them as a pair with the seed shoe. The seed shoe will wear out before the point will. So that seed shoe, brand new planter, it's even across the back vertically, even across the bottom horizontally. Most of the time, no matter how perfect that is, we'll wear one side off a little bit faster than the other. It's kind of a judgment call, because there's not, I think there is a number, a 1/4 inch or something of wear. We've all been planting for a long time. Been around equipment probably since we were all yay tall. That's a long time for you.
Yeah.
Use a little bit of judgment on it. If you can shave with it, it's probably time to replace it. And then, like I said, replace it as a pair with the point.
Or when you change the opening disc, right? Same time?
Usually I can get about twice as long out of a shoe as I can the discs.
It starts to become a judgment call if you're doing a preseason inspection and you're starting to see where that mild steel red is starting to see a wear and it's starting to get worn down to a point where it's sharp where you can shave with it. As Matt commented, if not, another wear sign is at the front. There is a spot weld at the leading edge of that. And once you get into that spot weld, that's generally kind of that indication that you might have 1,000 more acres left on that planter, but you probably don't have 3 or 4. So it becomes a judgment depending on how many row unit acres you're going to put on every year.
To your point, if I'm taking the openers off this planter and there is some wear on the shoe, I'm probably replacing the shoe. Because I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to want to get into it the next year, pull the openers back off of it just to change the shoe at that point.
So openers are, wore out at 14.5 inches? Or?
Yes.
I replace openers every year for no-till. Just can't, you don't want to stop in the middle of the next season.
Right.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's right.
So there is, I don't know if it's out yet,
Yes.
a heavy duty blade option.
It's a new part number
Yes.
just came out.
Yes.
Yep. It's in service parts for this year. So
Yep.
let's talk a little bit about it. So I heard someone in the crew here whisper something about bearing life. So over the years, from 1200 series or early 2000 series, we have changed bearing configuration, bearing cages, rivets on our opener discs more than twice. We'll call it that. There might have been a 1 in front of that too. About a dozen times we've changed it. Where we're at is we are now with a cast bearing retainer. Our bearings are a split inner race. So when this nut is torqued in, no different than a wheel bearing, we're crowding those bearings together to get a stability out of that disc. We take the nut off, we take the disc off to inspect it. Man, that inner race is loose, right? That's really no way to judge the integrity of that bearing. It really needs to be torqued down for us to measure the amount of deflection in that bearing. That's a little bit about the bearing. We're finally to a stable point in evolution where that cast hub, that bearing style has been getting us a lot of acres. But we're not getting as many seasons out of the openers as we've wanted. For many years, the Case IH brand has gone by the Earth Metal brand name. And we've actually now, in service parts, offered come up with a different opener disc with a different metallurgy behind it. Still 4.5 millimeters thick, same bevel, same properties, but we're seeing maybe as much as 30% more life out of that different metal.
So you could get 2 seasons.
When you're on the, in your example where you're on the bubble, where you're going to get maybe
A season and a half.
safely into that second half or that first, through the first half of your season, that extended life disc is probably your ticket to 2 seasons. Maybe move that bubble into the 3rd season. So we've ran quite a number of them last year where we're confident enough to sell them over the parts counter. We're going to run it this one more year as a service part, and then we'll probably put them in as a factory option going into model year 27. Disc takes all the abuse, right? Bearings are shot. If you are running fewer acres or getting the life that you want out of your discs, that leading and trailing disc are the same. So between season 1 and 2, you could actually disassemble and flop your discs to share some of that load, depending on how many row unit acres you're putting on every year. That means that you're getting into that row unit. Good conversation. What other questions?
Are we to gauge wheel arms yet?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Before we leave openers, let's talk scrapers. So, from the factory, many of the planters that you've had for many years have scrapers from the factory. Matt taught me this trick yesterday. He said the most obvious part, really this radius is your wear indicator, right?
I can see it from the back without tearing down rows. I do a lot of planter inspections. If I can find something to do it quicker, I'm going to. Especially someone like you that tears them down every year.
So I put new scrapers in and out every year because non-scouring muck or wet 2019 spring, you gotta have internal scrapers to,
Yep.
otherwise you're just out all the time.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so what you just brought forward is internal and external scrapers. On the new planters, they will come from the factory with internal scrapers. It is a retrofit kit, and you found that. So especially in the muck soils, trying to keep both sides of this disc scraped before we get into a plugging situation. That is a feature that's out there that many of the earlier planters were not built with. So I want you guys to be aware of that. Okay.
Gauge wheels, gauge wheel arms. I've got a feeling I know what your issue with the. No. Are they bending?
No, they're wore out in 2 years. Not so much on my 2150, but on my 2140 with the narrow gauge wheels, like you can do this with 2,500 acres in the plant.
So, what he's talked about is there's lateral play here, right?
Yeah, but
A lot.
that might.
Yeah, a lot. So, those pins here are a wear item. Most of the time I see the wear on a pin, not the arms.
I got the opposite.
Like I say, it's not every time, but where I'm from, I see a lot more pins worn out than arms. This is one of those times where I need him to put his earmuffs on.
No, I'm still listening. I'm still listening.
Copperhead Ag makes a kit to replace those pins. I know your arms are worn out. The pin kits have got smaller shims. We can shim them tight. Both sides will actually be shimmed with a nut that we preload. So even if there is a little bit of play in the arm, a lot of play in the arm, with a shim on both sides of it, it's about a 2.5 inch outside diameter shim. I hold that straight. I can then shim it correctly for the opener because we're a real small shim and it is preloaded. It's also greasable. So, you know, maybe something if you've got, if they're just absolutely smoked, let's get new arms, put the copperhead pins in it and not let, because what happens, so we pull our gauge wheels, right? Our gauge wheels are set like this. They want to trail straight. The trailed gauge wheel arms are great. I'm sure every one of us pushed a wheelbarrow. If you're gonna push a wheelbarrow over approach into a barn, it really sucks pushing it, right? Front tire jumps way up off the ground, you gotta put a lot of force into it. If you turn around and pull it over it, it pulls up and over nice and easy. It's the same mentality with pulling our gauge wheels. Since we pull them, it rolls up and over things nice and easy. We're not trying to drive them into the ground, we're pulling them across the top of the ground. That being said, our openers are at an angle. Our gauge wheels have got to be at an angle. If you pull them, they want to pull straight. So we're always side loading those pins and those arms. With this system, the only place that we're loading is, so if that's pulling in, we're loading the front side of the pin on the outside of the arm and the back side of the pin on the inside of the arm. With that copperhead system, since we're preloading the sides of the arm, we're actually spreading that weight out over a much larger surface area. I'm not allowing it to flex in to where what you're seeing. So there are some aftermarket options that we can put on these planters that we can solve those problems. Like I said, I put a set on a 1255 2 months ago. They were pretty shot. About half the wear was on the pin, and I was able to keep him from buying new arms because I put those pins on. They are more expensive than these pins. These pins are $14 a piece, $28 a row. About $120 a row to put the copperhead set on.
Some play is expected though.
Yeah.
Like, so when you get to his situation, I mean, obviously it's moving a lot, but like, if you just got a little bit of play, it's not critical that you just want to.
Right, I mean, they're going to want to pull into the blade. So whenever you're shimming those, you got to make sure you pick them up because you'll get a little bit of different play there. I mean, this row unit's against the blade now. I can't hardly move it. So yes, if you got a little bit of play, great. That's fine. They're going to, like I said, they're going to want to pull in.
So when you shim it, when you know, I'm going to put new blades here on next week or whatever, you just want it to be close. You don't want to touch it at all.
With it, the way I've always done it, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'll pick it up and spin the gauge wheel, and I just heard it scuff.
That's what you want?
Yep. If I press in a little bit, that one's, it's on the tight side, but one of our shims on the opposite side is going to make it too tight.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about the copperhead kit, because the shims are about a 1/16 of an inch thick, where these are a 1/4 of an inch thick. So I can really dial that in. They do seem like they're a little bit smoother. Like I said, they are greasable. So we can extend the life of some of these parts. I like them because I don't have to mess with that damn cotter pin when I'm in the field. I can reach in there with a 13 or 3/4 inch wrench, break a nut loose, pull the gauge wheel arm off. Like God intended. I've messed with a lot of gauge wheel arms, and that one sucks next to the tire.
Sounds like they just need to put it on the factory.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
At least make it greasable so that
Right.
you're not just having metal on metal all day.
Right.
And hoping that the grooves stay open, that they don't pack full of dirt.
Right. So that's another reason why I like the copperheads. They are greasable. There's holes in the bottom of the arms, a little square hole. You got to plug that hole when you go to the copperheads. That's the hardest part of the whole install. So I tell you, use JB Weld, and if you try to do it with them on, the JB Weld wants to run out.
So you grease it from the side?
Yeah, it's right on the end of the pin. Okay. Yep. So, gauge wheels, my dear guys. Those Deere Kenzie, they're on flat gauge wheel, right? They do that to create compaction. They don't run a seed shoe to hold this seed trench open. So they have to hold it open long enough for their closing system to close it. We run a reduced inner diameter gauge wheel so that we've put anything, we're capable of putting a lot of downforce down. Row unit's heavy, we can put a lot of downforce down. We've put that pressure, 2 inches further away from our seed trench on either side. So any compaction that we are making is further away from the seed. Roots are going to get there eventually. We hope that it's not an issue by then. A big strong plant, we can punch through it. The other side of that is when we displace seed from soil from opening, we've got a place to put it. It rolls up into that reduced inner diameter gauge wheel, stays nice and soft. Whenever we come back with our closing system, it folds right back in. So we do offer a flat closing or flat gauge wheel. It's not designed for this closing system. 2000 series planters do offer a V-pinch closing system. Matt knows some guys on the East Coast that would be happy to sell you the V-pinch closing systems that they took off their planter to put this back on.
If V-pinch is the right solution for you,
Yeah, there's
you're
a
going to need to
million different
order it
ways of
from the
farming,
factory.
right? It's just an option.
We tried to make friends with planter owners of different colors, and we've developed that system. It is by far the least take rate, and it does not work with the agronomy of our planter in most applications.
Yep.
So with that in mind, we had a customer that felt very passionate about it. He ordered a 24-row planter with them. It was about a month into season when we ordered him the two-stage closing. And there's a pallet box of V-pinch closing wheels that are laying in the weeds and getting closer to the scrapyard every day. So it is radically different than what the competition does, but it works. Agronomically, it works.
Mm-hmm. Any other things on gauge wheel arms? Anybody got 2160? Sweet. Don't have bent gauge wheel arms. Gotcha.
Okay. You, sir, had questions about muck. What is it that you fight in muck?
Those wheels pushing for one.
These?
Bad, yeah.
Okay.
That needs both two wheels or something.
Okay. So just the overall, the wing wheel is too heavy in muck. Okay. I don't know that I've got a quick solution for that. But let's talk. What is your next big hurdle that you're fighting in muck?
I think they were Suncoat trash wipers will fill up.
Okay. So where they were filling up, installing, or okay.
But maybe that's because those were pushing.
Once we start to get into a push situation, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
So I had the same problem he's having with the wing when you get into when you're trying to break the surface. So if it's that wet, sometimes you gotta try to pull a vertical till to dry it, just to get a little surface dry out. But if you got a wet spot and the rest feels dry, and you go through that wet, and you can still pull it. It'll start to not want to turn, and then it bulldozes this big. Even though your tractor's still going,
Yep.
get this big muskrat hut of stuff in front of you.
Yep.
You got to stop and try to back up, and if you do, then everything sinks in the ground, and then you plug up your speed tubes and all that stuff. So
Yep.
if there's a way to make the wing tire keep turning, whether it's a ribbed tire or power assist, I mean, you could go through this planter. You go through almost anything wet on muck if you can keep that wheel turning.
Okay. Okay. I don't have a lot of experience with muck, so I want to ask that question. Okay.
You can plant muck wet. You can pull it,
Okay.
and then it dries out, and it's fine.
Yeah, but I don't know. Ours wasn't that wet, so it was the first year for the plant.
Okay.
The deer went through it. With 2 wheels on it.
Okay. What size planter?
16 rows.
16 row. Front fold. Okay.
I almost wonder if you didn't turn your wing downforce down, if you knew those.
Took and did that.
You get
Okay, I figured you would.
that can help it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you actually want to take some weight off the center,
Right.
but then that drives those deeper. So there's like a
Yeah, there's a balancing act there. I can say I had a guy had similar issue. I mean, not on muck, but I was pushing these outside rows an inch and a half deeper than the inside rows. It's a box planter, 16 row, so I didn't need to take any weight off the center. We ended up pulling the cylinders off because even turned off, we were applying a little bit of pressure. So that guy, we ended up just pulling wing downforce completely off, and it plants great now. Thing over everything.
And that was individual boxes.
It was a box planter, yes sir.
That's what I've got.
So
But we had to take the wing downforce with some of the precision stuff on it.
yep, yeah. If you go hydraulic downforce, ordering it requires wing downforce. I would say try pulling that pin right there by Josh. Pull the pin on that whenever you get into those muck fields and just see. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's something that I've seen help with my ground.
If you turn it off, doesn't it have no force?
You saw that pressure one.
You still end up with a little bit.
It's if we go back to remote lever in our tractor speak, when you turn it off, it doesn't go to float. Is my belief. So
Yeah,
unpinning and getting that cylinder right out of the way,
that may be enough to get you through those spots. Like I said, I don't deal with muck, so I'm kind of spitballing here, but I've had to do it on some of my planters too.
with the planters that you have, are you running this tread design wing wheel?
It's whatever's key with it.
Okay. So I talked about tires up at the front. This is a VF tire. You know, in different tillage operations, sometimes we see a different tread pattern helps keep that wheel spinning, where maybe that straight groove isn't helping in that situation. So just trying to think through it and talk through it with you guys. In a heavy soil, we love that tire because it starts to roll like an oval. We crush that sidewall of that tread, and we get a bigger footprint. Maybe that's not helping us in muck. I don't know.
I think just having something to keep it a lug, just so that eventually, especially if you have the mud scraper on the back, which you almost have to have.
Yep.
Because it'll just sit, if you don't, it just builds up.
It gets taller. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
You know, as an extreme case, if we envision if that had tread like a skid steer tire, right, where it's going to force it to keep that wheel turning. I don't know. Let me ask some questions and
Say either that
trying to
or
reason through it with
use
you.
that wing downforce like a Kinsey and pick the wings up. If there was a way to do that.
What's that?
If we could use the wing downforce like a Kinsey and hold that wing up.
Of course, you're pulling the wheel on
Kind of like we do with the row lift. I think
Yep.
for those situations, if we could go in and
do a negative lift. Or negative
activate
downforce.
that and hold it level.
Yep.
Not let it set here. So something
Okay.
for engineering.
Yeah.
Have another wheel under it.
I think that would help out. I mean, you spread the force out that much more, right? I know it is an option on 16 row to have dual wing wheels.
24, I think, is where we
I know
get it.
24 was. I thought it was an option for the 16s. At some point, I think I've seen that in a price book. Whether they've taken that out or not, I'm not a salesman, so.
It's not something we're going to fix here today, but I want to talk through
Yeah.
it as a group. Okay.
So, moving on up with our row unit here, our parallel arm bushings. Something that I've run into quite a few issues here in the last 2 years that I never really looked at before. These bushings here should be a poly bushing, outer bushing with the metal inner bushing. Everything, I know 24 and before was that way. I've seen a lot of premature wear in those bushings. It allows for the rear end of this row unit to really move excessively. I've seen some where they've ate out that whole bushing and started getting into the arm. I was able to pick up that back tire probably 4 to 6 inches. So that means our closing discs are able to come up more. It means our openers are able to come up more because everything's behind them, right? Case knows that there was an issue. We've actually gone through 3 different iterations of hardware now. Whenever these things first came out, it was a patch bolt. So I had a piece that looked like dry Loctite on it with a lock nut. Everybody complained they were too hard to take off. Case listened. Went to just a lock nut. Lock nut started backing off. So then I've got loose hardware rattling around here. I just had a 2160 this winter. Hardware was rattling around. We egg shaped the holes in this header bracket. That header bracket's welded to the frame. Case doesn't have a fix for that. We're back to lock nuts and patch bolts now. Case knew that there was an issue with that bushing, so they've come out with, they call it a centered metal. It's powdered metal pressed into a form, and then they soak it in heated 30-weight engine oil. So it's oil impregnated bushing. I have not been around them. They're out. They're going to be 25, 26.
Yep, they're in production as service parts.
Yeah, they're available to put them in now.
We've
20s.
been running them for the model year 25 plant.
Okay, so 25 model year planters will have them from the factory. Another time when I found something that I feel like is better. Precision Planting Solutions offers a couple different bushings for these arms. Like I said, the ones that I've ate through the poly and into the arm, that bottom arm is $495. So yeah, I saw that. That's the same look my customer gave me. His is actually the one that ate into the arm. PPS makes an oversized bushing where we can remount that hole, press in an oversized bushing, put a metal inner bushing in, so we're nickel on nickel. Nickel's been around a long time. The other thing that I like about them is they're a little wider than a factory bushing. So we're spreading that force out. I mean, we're 450 pounds of downforce capable of it. We're spreading that weight out over a larger bushing so we get longer life out of it. Not talking down on the centered metal ones. Hopefully PPS has got a term limit now, and once I get cycled through all of them and we get centered metals and everything, hopefully I never have to do that again, because it is a chore to ream out all those holes. They make them for the 1200 series planters too. That's an even bigger chore by the arm. You're gonna make up the difference in labor. But they've been great. You know, it's $130 a row instead of, you know, $500, $600 a row for arms. So there is another aftermarket option out there for that. But it is something that is easy to overlook. I overlooked it for a long time. I was used to Kinseys. Kinsey bushings, when they fail, they crush and they fall out. So when I did inspections, I'd look in there and go, yep, bushing's there. Just happened to pick up on that row on one that was really bad and found out how to test them. So pick up on your press wheel. You'll take all the slack out of your spring. If you can pick up on it more, your bushing's got some wear. If you can pick up on it a lot more, your bushings are shot.
You're saying all the bushings, or is there certain ones that are where?
From what I've seen, and it makes no sense, it's this bushing and this bushing are the first to go.
Crisscross or?
Yep. And it doesn't make any sense to me because we put all of our pressure down on the bottom or on the bottom parallel arm, right? So why this one wears out, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is we've got enough force pushing back up that it's crushing these. Whenever I replace them all. I have seen that poly bushing get thin enough that it won't wear through the poly. It'll start beating on the arm, and you'll egg shape an arm without wearing through the poly.
How many seasons in are you seeing that?
I'm starting to see where, I'm going to say 3,000 to 4,000 acres. I'm not replacing them then, but it's something that I'm making note of when I'm doing my inspections, that there is wear there. I'm probably replacing them closer to 6,000 acres. These meters have been great. First time I ever ran one on a test stand, me and my service manager picked up the test stand and shook it, trying to get it to skip, and it wouldn't. Running about 20 inches of water. You're probably 9 times out of 10 going to be between 18 and 22. I always start them at 20. Very seldom do I come off of it. About the only wear point that I've found in these is the seal. If you press on it, and it's not really acre dependent, it's time, they'll dry rot. It's Teflon seal, rubber dry rot. So if you press on it and you start getting cracks in the corners, it's time to start replacing them. The only other issue I've ever had with these meters has been with the brush. And it was of no fault of the, how did I end up with two halves of this brush here? It was no fault of Precision, no fault of Case, no fault of anybody but the farmer. He got mice. They crawled up the seed tube and ate the brush. They did it like over a weekend when it rained. So he had been planting, went back to planting, and seed was just pouring out of the meters. So if you've got a cold storage, you know, somewhere where you don't go real often, might have mice in it, crack a meter open, take a look at your brush before you start dumping that good cheap seed corn out on the ground.